All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. In our first segment, we had Kristine Sawicki and Becky Leichtling here to talk a little bit about what we saw from students over the course of the past year as they engage with this application process in what is now year two of pandemic college admissions. We're hoping it's the final year of pandemic college admissions, but we don't have a crystal ball. If we did, we would make even more money, I suppose, in our line of work. What we want to talk about now is what did students do who did it really well, who were able to keep balance throughout this process, who were able to navigate deadlines, who have good relationships still with their parents at the end of this whole process and feel good about everything. What are some common characteristics among students who are really on top of things this year? Becky, what do you think? Did you notice anything that was a trend around your students that were really on top of it, or who kind of managed this in a way that felt less stressful?
Yeah, so I was thinking still more about what Kristine had said about independence as a character trait. And I was actually thinking about students who saw their own power. And now I'm thinking about all those cute YouTube videos of like little kids and their daily affirmations. I am this and I am that. And I feel like students more than ever before had experiences with different types of learning environments. And they had a sense of what worked for them and what was hard for them about academic culture and academic structure in ways that most teenagers don't get, because you just go to one school and that's the culture there. But transitioning between remote, hybrid, in person, all of that gave students more an increased vocabulary to talk about what they need to thrive in a school setting. And I think that students who saw that as a thing they could be in charge of, saying this worked, this didn't, and so I'm seeking this, I felt a huge difference in the way their final college lists were good fits, which then in turn is perceived by the colleges. They see that in the student too.
That's right.
And again, we talked about the deficit mindset. In contrast, students said, I picked up this skill. I was baking. I was looking after my little brother. I grew. That sort of sense of self, when you could claim it, made a big difference in how the application comes together.
I would add on to that. I think that you're talking about developing a vocabulary and having these experiences that are not ideal, but you still get some value out of them in terms of your understanding of self. I think students, for me, that were able to communicate that with me, that were able to articulate what they were looking for, that could tell me when they were not understanding a project or feeling stressed by a part of the search or not understanding why they had to do the research in a particular kind of way that I was recommending. It was that open communication that created lots of opportunities for us to coach, right? To work with them, to help them be in a position where they could use what they had learned about themselves to apply it to the process. And so that open channel of communication is always something that I talk with students about prioritizing early on. And I really saw that was a mark of an effective student's process this past year, especially. Kristine, anything that you saw that was a consistent positive among students?
I think two things really stand out to me. One is those who took the college research process with it, building off of what we were just talking about, and had shorter lists that were thoughtfully picked. They were the ones more likely to finish on time at a comfortable pace, making sure that each of those essays really were their best effort going forward. So I don't think that was particular to this year, but a consistent plus. The other thing that stands out to me is one student, before early decisions announced, wrote to me about, I didn't know that the college process was actually going to be fun. And I loved that so much, that this process, which is so often associated and tied with stress and anxiousness, could be fun for students. And I think part of that comes from empowering them, to build off of Becky's comment, of colleges are interested in that growth experience. They are interested in who you are, and helping them feel the power of telling their story is fun. Fun for me as an educator. I think fun for students that we support. And I love that.
Yeah.
I think also like that sense of fun, like I love that. I want every student to feel that. I also think new things are hard. This is a big thing. I think there's no way to not have a little bit of fear. It's unknown. You've never done it. But I think that when fear is what's driving the decision making, I saw that consistently not work. To your point, Kristine, adding 5 more schools at the end because there's not an extra essay. Those never turned into yeses, right? Like the adding 10 more because I read in the newspaper that no one's getting in, that doesn't translate to success. And to your point, Ian, success is how you feel about your process. And if you can figure out how to trick yourself or make it real that you are in charge of this, that you are informed and making smart choices, you're going to feel so much better about whatever comes than if every part of it is driven by fear.
Yeah, I have 3 boys who I work with this year, and I think maybe their moms might listen to the show. I'm not totally sure, so I'm not going to say their names.
Moms.
But hi, moms, how you doing? These 3 boys, all I think had really great processes. They were all done by about mid-November with the work that they needed to do. Every single one of them removed colleges from their preliminary list, because either they decided, you know what, that's a stretch. I'm not more excited about that than a school that I'm pretty confident I'm going to get into, so I'm not even going to apply. Or I tried to sit down and write this essay and nothing came. I couldn't decide what I would write in response to this question, so I'm not going to apply. And I said, that's great. And so those boys removed colleges from their list. They went from having 11 or 12 schools down to having 7, 8, or 9 schools. All of them have been admitted to at least one school by now. They all felt really good about the process along the way. Their moms were really pleased with the outcome so far of the process. And I even got from those moms thank yous before the decision started to come in, again, which is a key indicator to me that we've managed this really well. I will also say that with respect to those parent relationships, and I don't know if you two noticed this, but for me, parents were somewhat less present in the process this year than I think they have been historically. And I think that's part of everybody being overwhelmed by all the things. I think about getting emails from schools, my kids' schools, and being like, I don't have time for this. Like I got all this other stuff going on. But with these moms, they were out of the way and letting the students drive the process. But when it came time to really push because of deadlines or because of things needing to be done, they kind of stepped in and gave that little push to their sons. And I think that it worked really well. And these kids live in 3 different states on both coasts, right? So it's not a regional thing, but just something that I observed across that small group of boys.
That's interesting to think about the parent shifts in the parents. I found, going back to our conversation about fit, I think a lot of parents had an insider's view on how their student moves through the school day.
Yeah.
For kids that were learning from home when the parents were working from home. And so I think the conversations that families were having about what matters in finding a good fit college were a little bit different. Folks were collectively more focused on what students need to feel healthy and well, what students need to feel smart, what support systems or what prompting from a teacher. It felt more present for everyone, which was interesting to me. And I agree with you that a lot more parents were letting their student do their thing for a host of reasons. But I do think that family conversations were different with my students this year.
Interesting. Cool.
And I'd echo, and maybe we have found one of those trends we can say more definitively was present this year, that parents did support that independence that their students were bringing. And it's so easy and natural for me to see a tie to what the last 2 years have been connected to that.
Yeah.
What about in the coming year for us, right? So we're working with juniors. And I think I talked to you two about retail work, our work with students more than any other educators here. We have lots of conversations. We do observe trends that we see with classes. And it's kind of this funky thing where it's like the class of 2022 has these characteristics. I can just kind of see it coming through in my students and your students. But as you think about the class of 2023, what are you going to do differently? What is something that you are going to encourage students to do in this coming year because you've seen it work for students or because you've seen that it hasn't worked for students in the past? What is now a new arrow in your quiver that you can apply? Kristine is raising her hand right now. She's like, please call on me. I have an answer for this. So go ahead. Yeah, take it away.
I have a really specific answer. I have coined my New Year's resolution in supporting students in the upcoming year. And it is related to last minute work. And I typically when I'm talking with a family, advising the timeline process for how we're going to maneuver through the actual application work, I say you want to have typically your personal essay ideally done by the time senior year starts, which tends to be a later August. But with school supplemental essays being green lit for the Common App August 1st when it launches, I am going to set an earlier goal of August 1 to give that maximum time and ideally get not just the personal essay, hopefully put together ideally, but starting work on some of those supplemental essays. This year, a lot of students had that, oh, I was so busy this week, this thing came up, and early is going to be my goal.
Okay.
I think to that point, because so many applications open on August 1st, if you can confirm your list by August 1st, it's going to be so much easier to then see, what do I have to do? But I would say that the latest you should finalize your list is October 1st. Because after that, you need to be finishing things, your deadlines are approaching. And if you're still trying to figure it out, that's where folks are adding schools at the end, and it's not always ideal, I think.
You can remove schools after October 1st.
You can,
but please don't
add
add any new ones.
I think one thing, and Kristine and I are both planners in different ways, I think in addition to those deadlines, part of my sense of having a student-driven process means supporting families to flex on the timelines and expectations that we have. And I know it's my job in the process as the person who's been through it so many times to provide structure and clarity about deadlines. But I think checking in with families regularly about, hey, given where life is right now, do you need a taskmaster? Or do we all need some grace? And let's check in again in 2 weeks after we've had a reset. And I think best laid plans are best when they can shift a little bit, and that's okay.
And it's great to have a counselor like us who can be a taskmaster, but even within the home, if you have multiple people who can help support you, maybe you have an aunt or an uncle who can help with the process, because you know if mom is going to be your taskmaster, it's going to be destructive to your relationship. Find someone who can help to support you through that process. But I think coming up with the best plan for yourself is really, really key, really critical. And you've got to be honest with yourself about what you're going to need. My response, I think, kind of relates to what you're both saying about the list and starting earlier. I am really going to try and discourage students from copying and pasting content from supplemental essays into new supplemental essays. And we talk sometimes on the show about working smart rather than working hard. And I think that when I am reusing essay content that doesn't necessarily fit with the prompt for a new school, I'm not coming at it with an approach that acknowledges that school as a unique kind of program. And I'm not necessarily thinking about my fit within the program. Now, there are times when you can definitely talk about the same kind of themes, but I think if you're in the moment where you're really relying on content that you're reusing over and over and over again for the same schools, you're getting away from really thoughtful work that's going to make your application better. Maybe that's something that I haven't totally baked yet, but it's something that I've been thinking about recently with respect to executing best essays for schools. Becky, are you going to disagree with me? You are.
What would a show be without a? I don't know. I think that students read a prompt quickly and might assume, oh, I can reuse this. And that's false. I think it is so important to, before you do anything, read that prompt and try to think about where is this question coming from? And make sure that you are honoring the intent of your question. But I do think that so many questions overlap in ways that I'm very comfortable with 90% of your content being copy pasted, as long as you are intentionally making sure it acknowledges the response. And so, some students get into trouble with the variations on why do you want to go to this college, or why this major, or why this major at this college, where they miss the subtlety, and that's a mistake. But if the colleges are asking the same question with slightly different word counts, I think it is smarter to repurpose than to rewrite.
That's a more nuanced way of saying what I plan to do. That's usually where we get to, is we're on the same page. You just have a better way of expressing
Hear the
it.
nuance of the question. Hear the nuance of that question.
Well,
sure.
And I'm coming into, I think this is my 10th year doing this. And I find when I read an essay prompt or an essay, I look at the prompt and I actually read it. And then I highlight the specific question that's being responded to with all of that content. Even though I've read this Michigan essay prompt 900 times, I'm still highlighting what that specific question is, because I want to read the response with that question in mind.
And the values behind it.
And the author better be doing that too, man, because if I'm putting in the time to read the essay with that prompt in mind, you better be writing it with that prompt in mind. Any other thoughts, any other reflections coming out of 2021? I think we're all really glad that we're into the next year, into 2022 and looking ahead. Are there other things that you'd like to add?
Test optional is real. It actually is optional. This is another place where kids have power. You are in charge of the way you present your data to schools. I think that's amazing.
Awesome. That's great. Kristine, anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm getting excited by Becky empowering students. She's empowering me in the process too. And that's what I would love for every listener to take away, is that this is your process, and lean into the power that allows.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for agreeing to come on when I proposed this to you a week ago and said, hey, why don't we do this? So you're both always game for it. I really appreciate it. It's fun to have two faces to look at on the show. And folks, thanks a lot for joining us. When we come back, we are going to talk about income-based loan repayment programs. So you'll want to stick around to hear more about that.